Hey, I'm Adrian Nelson, and welcome to this video that is about what tarot is really about. Because you know what, and I'm just gonna dive right into this. You know, so many times I see things online and things about tarot. Are they coming back? Do they still love me? And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a normal human thing to want to have love. Humans are communal beings. I almost think of humans like fishes. Um, it's not a rule of thumb for all fish, but in general, fish are happier when they live amongst their own kind. So, in general, when you normally go and get fish, you will get like six or eight of the same ones because they can sort of like chill with each other, and the same thing with human beings and plants and most animals and things like that as well. So tarot itself has become incredibly watered down um, through the years. And whereas before it was this thing that people were so afraid of and they were so scared of, it has now become this sort of fly by night thing, especially when it comes to sort of like romance and stuff like that. And initially in this video, what I really wanted to speak about today was sort of like the difference between traditional Rider-Waite tarot and Osho Zen tarot. And the reason why I wanted to do this because I've got no idea what today's date is. Today is September the 28th, 2022. Now we know. 12:27 p.m. if anybody's interested. Um, and I really wanted to speak about the difference between the two, but maybe that's an altogether different video, or I'll work it in here. But what I really felt very strongly encouraged to speak about is what is tarot really? Um, because first of all, there's not really a tarot that's sort of like the one superior to the other. Because what I hear quite a lot is that people will say that Rider-Waite is incredible. Obviously, I've had this one forever. The cards are like right over here and like the box over there, and I've got all sellotape and stuff around to keep it together. But a lot of people often say that Rider-Waite tarot is the entry level, and then they will say that Osho Zen tarot is the next level or the intermediate. And I don't have a Thoth tarot deck here with me, but then they will say that Thoth is that next level. And full disclosure, I used to kind of look at it that way as well. But the reason why I looked at it that way is because it was really just from a point of not understanding, not knowing any better. So making very sort of like confident statements from not actually knowing and just from things that I've heard. So I think let me start off by kind of like explaining a little bit where tarot is really coming from, or what tarot actually really is. Because the thing to understand, so let's say for example you look at the Rider-Waite tarot cards, the very sort of like familiar images, and there's like 78 of them and all that sort of things. Um, Tarot itself, it's it's not the cards. The cards are a representation of the energy, but it's not. So when you think of tarot, tarot is not cards. Tarot is the energy of life. It's the essence of life. It's all about the creation of life, the evolution of the universe itself. Quick example. Say for example, you look at something like in tarot, there are 22 major arcana cards. And those 22 major arcana cards, yes, there was a lot of sort of like, this way and that way sort of things that went around with it through the years, because the earlier civilizations, they really understood how powerful something like tarot actually is. Tarot, astrology, numerology, symbiology, people working with the elements, so the elements being earth, water, air, fire, the earlier pagans, witches, witchcraft, shamans, the or the African Sangomas, the Mayans, the ancient Egyptians, all of those civilizations really, they understood that there's an energy, there's a power that is always working, that is always at hand, that is always present. And a lot of times when we do spiritual practice, we want to try and connect with that energy. We want to try to utilize that energy. We want to try and become one with the energy. But by the mere sort of practice of trying to become part of the energy, you are sort of separating yourself from the energy. You are making yourself separate from it, like it's not really part of you. But the simple truth is that you are part of everything, and everything is part of you. You're part of the collective consciousness. You are the collective consciousness, and so and literally as like literally, I'm talking about the 101 of the 101 of tarot. That is the basis understanding where it comes from. That you are not really separate from anything. Um, Also, um, the when you look at the 22 cards of the major arcana that I was speaking about, the reason why there's 22 cards, because in many ways it is it's a little bit challenging to explain this briefly, so I'm going to do my best. Okay. Obviously, when I do coaching, I really go very in-depthly into this. And here's the thing to know: what a tarot, like when you go for tarot coaching, for example, it's energy coaching, it's magic. You can have a 10-hour tarot reading class without one tarot card actually even being present there. Now, I do have an online tarot reading class. It's about 10 hours long. And obviously, we do go through the cards in that. And I really take you through the phases from the beginning. What is energy? How do you protect your energy? How do you safely interact? When I say protect your energy, how do you safely or responsibly interact with who and what you actually are? Because you are the energy, and it's almost like if you kind of think of yourself as a leaf on a tree. Think of yourself as a leaf on a tree. Um, you as an individual, you might be an individual leaf, and you're one of many thousands of leaves, and there's been leaves before and there'll be a leaf after you, type of thing. But first of all, no two leaves are the same. In the same way that no two fingerprints, DNA, none of those things are the same. When you really look at the leaf and at the pattern and whatever, it's never really the same, even though fundamentally it is the same. And that's the same thing with human beings. We are all stars. Um, and it's amazing how the same we are, but also simultaneously how different we are. But it is, and our similarity doesn't so much lie in the things that sort of like correlates with us that is the same, but our similarity, and because the universe is very dual, our similarity very or more so lies in not our separation, our difference from one another. How we're not the same, which is it's quite incredible. If you think of flowers, for example, let's say you've got a whole bunch of flowers and they're all sort of different kind of flowers. Um, you are still part of the flowers. So all the different flowers, they're still flowers, but you contribute to this bouquet of flowers differently by your very nature, by your very being, by your structure, by your color, by your shade, by your whatever. Um, but you are perfect in your being, and it's in being sort of different that you are the same, because you're part of the same bouquet, you're a flower. It is your uniqueness that brings that almost divine expression of yours to fuller expression, so to speak. I remember back in the day, I used to be a professional photographer, and I used to do like a lot of like say for example, I did things let's say I was working with a couple of models, and so I would teach them, or what happened a lot at the time, because I was closely connected with a lot of people that was like in the fashion industry, and that sort of stuff, which is quite funny because I am probably the least fashionable person that you would ever meet, ever. I can't be bothered at all. But I will teach them how to sort of like in a profile, bring yourself forth, because as human beings through generations we have been taught that there is really not anything that's special about us. But I think that is one of the biggest lies that we've ever been told, and that really comes from powers that be that in many ways wanted to control us, so to speak. That wanted us to be naive and scared and not feel strong enough and unique and that sort of things. But then I'd also teach them that when you're in a group dynamic, so you're like in a group photo, for example, so let's say, um, you get casted and you're like in a group of like 12 people for whatever, an advert for deodorant or whatever. Then, how do you in that picture stand out but also become part of the picture. Because I think what we do as human beings sometimes is we try to either profoundly really stand out, or we are happy to just sort of like, sort of like melt away and not be seen. And both of these are really extremities. And when you look at something like the Tao Te Ching, for example, with Lao Tzu, it speaks about the extremities where you're either completely out there in everybody's face, or you try to make yourself invisible. And neither of the two extremities really, really work, because you get the extremity, for example, that you really want to be seen and shown. So you begin to pull some Hitler vibes, for example. But then you get the extremity where you kind of get, say, maybe social anxiety, for example, if you are outside where other people can see you. So neither of the extremities really serve your benefit, but there's this sweet spot basically in the middle. And the amazing thing is that the more things you learn, so I'm a Reiki master, I do crystal healing, I've been born highly intuitive. I do a lot of stuff. I'm probably going to forget some things, but I do numerology. I'm really into astrology. Obviously, I'm into tarot. I'm a regression hypnosis practitioner, what some people call past life regression. I do NLP. So I do like a lot of stuff. And the beauty of it all is that, it all is essentially, this is my experience, when you study something long enough and hard enough and intently enough, it all sort of comes back to the same thing, you know. So like Hermetics, for example, or ancient Egyptian sort of, magic, so to speak. It's really deep and it's really, intense in a way. But when you really get it, it all comes down to the same thing. And so even, for example, with my Reiki coaching, which you might say, well, what has that got to do with tarot? And everything, because it's energy. So I'm going to make you an example. So let's say, for example, you look at something like Reiki, which is energy healing, so to speak, or energy balancing. Um, sorry. And then you look at something like the Tree of Life. So maybe you're doing like advanced tarot, or you're studying like Thoth tarot, and you start, or you may be into Kabbalah, um, and you start to learn about the Tree of Life. Now, let's think about that, because now we're speaking about Thought Tarot, and even though in a way that is sort of still tarot but right away tarot, it is also something entirely different. And then you look at Kabbalah, which is also something different. And you look at Reiki, which is also something different. But effectively, when you understand all of those things well enough, it all comes down to the same thing. Because, as I said earlier on, the major arcana of tarot, for example, it is a representation of the Tree of Life with the 22 cards. But then you get into the other cards, and it's also the finer details of the Tree of Life. And you look at Kabbalah, and it's about the Tree of Life. And you look then, for example, at Reiki. You look at, I'm not going to say the symbols and things, because I like to be very responsible. So I just want you to understand, I'm not holding out information on you. I just like to be responsible in how I share information. And sometimes just knowing a little bit of something can actually be, quite dangerous. It can actually be quite destructive, because sometimes we know a little bit of something and want to roll with it something because, we think we know everything and then we don't, and that causes problems, which is typically just the ego, not serving your highest purpose. But so Kabbalistic teaching is about, well, it's not just about the Tree of Life, obviously, but it's about a lot of that sort of stuff. And then even then you get holy scriptures, for example, a lot of, say, maybe Christian people will maybe see or reason that you can't, for example, be looking at something like Christianity or be a Christian, for example, and also maybe say, for example, study Kabbalah, because they'll be like, well, that's a Jewish thing. Um, I would say that it's sort of Jewish founded, but I wouldn't really say that it's a Jewish thing. I would even go so far as to say that the Bible's not actually a Christian thing. And hold on a moment, they get mad at me. But this is what I mean by it. It's all just holy scripture. So let's think for a moment. So, like the different prophets that were here, the different beings that really communicated things, So there was Jesus that came about, and he taught a lot of things, and we, a whole lot of different scriptures. We turned that, and we sort of turned that into the Bible, which is now Christianity. But when you really think about it, Jesus was born and died a Jew, you know. Um, and then you, for example, look at something like Judaism and or even Islam, and there's a lot of correlation between religions. And from a very young age, I've been very interested in religions. And I think I sort of started with sort of like Egyptian mythology and stuff like that, which is still something that I'm very much learning. So at this point, I'm not all that knowledgeable about it. I know a lot, but I don't know like a lot. It's like I would say it's like a intermediate sort of understanding of astrology. You can do a chart for someone, but it's not like an understanding type of thing. And when you really look at everything, it sort of comes down to the same thing. And a lot of times you can almost say like the tree of life, everything like everything comes down to the tree of life, or you can also say that the tree of life is everything else, or everything is just one and everything is just connected, because we're not really separate from anything. So bringing all that back to tarot, you might be wondering where am I going with this, but um, tarot is not about other people. Tarot is not about whether that person loves you or not, or whether that person is, even so far as to say whether that person is cheating on you or not, and that sort of things. Tarot is about you, because life is about you, and you are about life, and we forget that because and when you look into Osho Zen Tarot, it looks more into the avenues that I'm going to speak about now, but it's really about the fact that your life is about you, and you are the one that gives direction to life, that gives dictation to life, so to speak. That you sort of like says, I want this and I want that, and stop this and stop that, and we don't always understand how that works. And so when you really learn tarot, and really, despite whether it's Rider Waite Tarot, Osho Zen Tarot, Thoth Tarot, it's really about learning about the energy of life, about the essence of life. It is about learning about the flow of life, the simple understanding that you are not separate from life. You know, um, that everything in life is just feedback. That one way or the other, you determine what happens to you. Like a lot of times, for example, people will ask me, especially in South Africa, we've got one of the radio shows that's called the SABC Radio, which is actually quite a big deal. And they have got this something called, now I have to, now you would think that for somebody that does this regularly, I would actually remember, but it's called Late Night Conversations, and I think Clairvoyant Mondays or something like that. But it's basically a talk show, and it's amazing. I love the people that I work with, and I just do it like occasionally, really. Um, but it's a lot of times people will ask, I would like to know about my life. I would like to know about my destiny. I would like to know about my life path. And the thing about your life path is that it's not that cut and dry. There are many different options that you can take. And if you go this path and that happens, you go that path and that happens. But by taking that, you're also creating something altogether different. Um, so nothing is really straight out. And so a lot of times I think the thing that scares people about tarot is, it's seen as this fortune telling sort of thing, which in effect it isn't really, because the future doesn't exist. The future is not set in stone. We are where we are based on the past, and our future is basically unfolding, um, basically determining on what we are doing right here, right now. That is really how it works. And so when you have a tarot reading, I mean, really, in the simplest terms, a tarot reading is really looking at your energy. Where are you now? How did you get there? And where is this taking you? And do you like this? And if you like it, I mean, great, kudos, let's rock this world. And if you don't like it, you have options around that. And obviously there's things like karma involved. What did you agree to when you came into this life, in your soul contract? What is the agreements that you have with your soul family? A lot of people, for example, they're always looking for their twin flame. And the way that I always like to explain this is that, well, first of all, the thing about a twin flame is that it's almost like Valentine's Day. It's been commercialized. People made it this thing that you have to find your twin flame. And that is the way to find happiness and joy and fulfillment and those things in your life. And then you get something like Osho Zen Tarot specifically, and it says, you know what, bullshit. That is not what your life is about. your life is about you. And so the way that I always ask people, especially when they're so set on they must find their twin flame, because it seems like nobody can just get into relationships these days anymore, or go for coffee or stuff like that. Everybody just meets their twin flame or lose their twin flame, and then they lost this twin flame and they say, I lost my twin flame but I got another one. I was like, oh, you got more than one. And I mean, I'm not meaning to pass judgment or anything like that, but the thing is that we are here as beings that help each other through this life, to support each other. We are family, effectively. And when we think of our soul family, it's that family that come in with us, that very close bond. But then you also have your extended family, like you basically have it if you live wherever. We have your neighbors and the other people that live in the other sort of residential area, and you know some well and you don't know some well. But I mean, you can tell, you can see that person's white, they're black, they Korean, they look very like, maybe they're like Swiss or German or something like that. And it's the same thing with our soul family, yeah. And so tarot in itself, so I just want to sort of like break it down. And I hope I'm making sense here, because I'm really trying to do that, because this is actually meant to inspire you. It's really not meant to sort of like, make you feel like tiny or small or anything like that. So let's just break the three up. And as I said, unfortunately, I don't have a Thoth tarot deck with me right now that I can show you, but most of you will know a Thoth tarot deck, and if you don't, you can just go and look the image up. But I'm going to go through this very, very briefly. So so you get Rider-Waite Tarot, and Rider-Waite Tarot is really the story of life. So it starts with the Fool, and I'm going to have to back this up a little bit to give it context. So before I speak about that, let's go back to the Tree of Life. So the Tree of Life, it's incredibly intricate. I won't say difficult. It's incredibly intricate. It's got a lot of details in it, and it's one of those sort of things that you don't get it until you get it, and then when you get it, you don't really unget it, because even though it's very intricate and sort of like very detailed, it's also actually incredibly simple. It really, really is, you know. And when you look at a lot of symbols and things, you actually find those symbols in there. So, for example, I said I wasn't going to give any names, but just to put it in any sort of context. So when you look at this one symbol, for example, that it's not necessarily a Reiki symbol, but it's used in Reiki and usually taught in the master level of Reiki, called Raku. And a lot of time Raku is about sealing in that energy. And then when you do an attunement for your students, in Reiki level 1, level 2, and then level 3 has got like advanced Reiki training, ART, as well as masters. So it's basically for initiations. You sort of seal the energy in with Raku. But when you understand, so say for example, you study something like Thoth Tarot, or probably symbiology, which would probably mean that you're going to study sort of like a bit of Kabbalah in the Tree of Life first. You see the symbol Raku in the Tree of Life. And when you understand it even more, when you really grasp it, and I mean, if you don't, it's not like the end of the world if you don't, but if you do, you get to really see the energy of tarot in the Tree of Life. It's I think when you first look at the Tree of Life, it looks incredibly simple. It looks incredibly like not that much, until you really begin to get it, and then it becomes quite a lot, which is interesting. But then you can see Raku in there. And then when you understand the Tree of Life, you understand it's not so much about sealing in the energy. It's more about understanding that you are the energy and the energy is you, that you're not separate from anything. So very basically with the Tree of Life, it's sort of like there's almost like the nothingness. But then by calling it nothing, you also make it something. So it's no longer nothing. And that sort of like then goes to one. But then there's the opposite of that, because then there's the order of the experience or the interaction, it creates something new and something different. And it's like the expansion, and then sort of like the sort of like the implosion of the universe again. I have this sort of theory. I may be right, I may be wrong. But we in the age of Aquarius at the moment, and then obviously the age of Pisces is what's coming next. And then when you look at zodiac energy, Pisces is sort of like the end of zodiac energy. It's sort of like the December of it. It's like the death and rebirth, because every ending goes along with a beginning and vice versa. And when you look at tarot, that is there. And so it's a story about life. It's about the story of evolution. It's a story of always ongoing. And so to come back to Rider-Waite Tarot, so when you look at the Fool, and you don't have to worry too much about looking up my courses and stuff. At this point in time, I've got a step-by-step tarot reading course, I've got an Osho Zen course, and I've got a free Oracle card reading course. I'm just going to put the links in the description, so you can check that out if you wanna. The first couple of lessons are free. In the Osho Zen Tarot course, there's like I think it's like 11 minutes of meditation, a guided meditation, but it's so beautiful because it really helps you to connect with the allness of who you are. And I created it after I had this beautiful experience one night. Bruno, my dog, is sleeping over there, my Jack Russell. But I obviously remember when I first got him, he was tiny. I could like hold him in my one hand. And I would, when I was still training him, I took him out at night. And I think that was about 10:30, so the world is nice and quiet. And I just had this beautiful experience of, it was a full moon. And looking at the moon and having this, I won't say an awareness, a oneness of being the observer that's observing the moon, but also being the moon being observed by the observer, and then feeling the breath of fresh air that was beautifully beginning to blow against my skin. And it was such an interesting experience because it was a cold sort of evening. Winter was just starting, so we're actually very much at the end of winter at the moment. We're technically in spring, but today's a bit of a chilly day, which is why I'm wearing this bright yellow jacket. But winter was just beginning, so it was sort of chilly, but it was still sort of warm enough for me to be standing outside barefooted. And it's funny because I love shoes and I'm almost never wearing them. I'm forever barefooted, But if I'm ever going to wear shoes, I like to wear nice shoes because I prefer to be barefooted. But then there was this warm breath of wind that was, literally almost touching the side of my face, like somebody was caressing me more gently than any, romantic interaction can ever really caress you. And it is this awareness that the breath that you experience, that you are also that breath, and as you sort of breathe in the oxygen of life or move into life, life is also breathing in you. And so tarot is all about that. And that guided meditation is there, and it's I didn't initially think to make it 11 minutes, but it ended up 11 minutes. And even 11:11 that everybody's so speaking about, it's also about that new beginnings. And obviously I can't condense everything into this video because it's just going to be too long. And I mean to sort of help you to get clarity and gain direction if that is what you're looking for. I don't want to sort of confuse you with all these high convoluted whatevers. So the Fool in energy in tarot, that first card, the Fool is really, it's about that zero energy. It's about that nothingness, which is then also the allness of who you are, because the universe is dual, and if something is nothing, it's also everything. And that is why the Fool energy is zero. And you'll see there's a little dot over there. And when you look at, I'm so sorry that I don't have a deck to show you now, but when you look at Thoth Tarot, and you can normally find this on YouTube, or if you don't have a deck, or you can just Google the image, but it's got this beautiful rosary cross at the back of the deck, which seems quite nice and interesting. But there's a little dot in the middle, which is sort of like that 0 point, that allness of who you are, where everything's coming from. And if you ever had or ever going to go and have, for example, like an astrology reading or numerology reading, then people typically ask you what's your date of birth, and do you know your time of birth and your place of birth? Because when you take that first breath of air, you basically breathing in a living energy. The universe is alive, and it's like a human being. Sometimes it's got a good day and sometimes it's got a bad day. And when you understand what's going on, knowledge is literally power. And so the Fool is really all about that. And then it moves into the rest of tarot. But tarot in itself, it's a story. It's a story all on its own. And it's an ever expanding story, because the universe is ever expanding, which is why the 22 cards of the major arcana or rather the 78 cards of all of the tarot, the cards are not tarot. The cards are just a representation of tarot, you know, um, in the same way that, um, let's say somebody interprets a piece of music. You are singing it and it's you singing it, but you're not really the music, but you also are, because the music is flowing through you. And it's new for you, but if it's maybe, I mean, we're in 2022, and if I sort of, play piano or maybe sing a piece of Mozart, then it's new to me, but it's not really new because it's always been around, but it's never really been existence to me until it becomes an existence to me. And then it's new to me, but even though it's new to me, it's also old. Um, and it's the essence of life. And though, even though, say, for example, Mozart conceptualized it, technically speaking, it was always a possibility that was there. It's almost like this beautiful writer of Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote a couple of things, but she's got this amazing book called Big Magic. Her name is Elizabeth Gilbert. It's an incredible book to really read, along with many others. Um, and if you're practicing tarot or want to practice tarot, sorry, you have to understand that you're never going to know everything about it, because we never know everything about life, and by looking at life we make life more. And it's the same thing with tarot, um, because tarot is it's like a spokesperson of life. So by consulting the cards, we are consulting what is and what could possibly be, and also what could not possibly be. But what could not be can also be, and because it can be, it also cannot be. And I know that sounds very sort of controversial, but life is dual. And so when you do a tarot reading for someone, the question is really, where are you in the story of life? You know, how's it working for you? It's like the 0 point energy of when you were born, when you took that first breath. Um, what is the energy that you entered with? You know, it's like, let's say you go to a restaurant and there's a la carte menu, and you say to the waiter, hey, what's nice? And the waiter's most likely going to ask you, well, what do you feel like? What are you in the mood for? What do you want to do today? Because you might be telling somebody about the incredible 20-day age steaks that you have, and meanwhile this person almost want to start throwing up because they are vegetarian, they're dead set against eating meat. Or you want to tell them about this incredible salad that you have that everybody's raving about, but this person is definitely into meat or more into seafood or that sort of thing, you know. So the when we consult the tarot, it is really about saying, well, actually, let me back that up a little bit. Let me back that up a little bit, and this does come more from Thoth Tarot, really. But the question that we ask is almost never the question. So when we look at regression hypnosis, for example, somebody comes to me and they say they've got problems with their health or a relationship or money, they've got this recurring thing and that recurring thing. And it's not about trying to fix anything. It's more about trying to understand why are you having this. Because within the why, you get the answer, you get the options. So a lot of times people will be like, I just want the answer. But when you understand the foundation of why you have what you have, the answer and the solutions, um, they really present themselves, and you can choose from that. And so it's very much the same with tarot. So you come with this as my concern, but you first want to find out what is the actual question. So to make an example of that is that, let's say somebody says, I'm so unlucky in love. And is your concern really about being unlucky in love, or is your concern that you feel that you're getting too old, you can't have a family, you maybe want to do the Disney trips or whatever? Or let's say, for example, somebody says, let's say somebody goes and live on a mountain, removed from people. And you often hear they say, well, why are you staying where you're staying? And people be like, well, I'm tired of people. I don't like people. People are unfriendly and they are nasty, and So I choose to rather be at a place where I'm at peace because I prefer to not really be surrounded by people. So I go over there where I can just be away from people with my animals and my plants, and I can sit there on my porch and not be bothered by neighbors, and I can smoke my joint, and I can do whatever, grow my own mushrooms or place my crystals in the garden, and nobody's going to steal my stuff, and whatever the case may really be. Um, and then the question is, why are you on this mountain in the first place? Are you there because you really want to be there, or are you there because you are frustrated with humans and with humanity? Because when you look at those two things, we are now looking at something entirely different. Because are you really at peace on top of the mountain? Because remember, it is and this is probably one of the most fundamental um, things that I can really share with you, that it is the intention behind the action that determines the outcome. Doesn't matter what the action is that you take. The intention behind the action determines the outcome. That's just how it is, you know. An example of that, a couple of years ago, I was done with South Africa. I moved to Abu Dhabi. I was never going to come back. I gave all my clothes away and all my stuff away. And when I got to Abu Dhabi, I have never been that unhappy in my entire life. Everybody else around me was happy and ravingly happy, but I was running away. I was feeding the energy that I'm trying to get away from. And that is why a lot of times in life we take inspired action, but then the question is, what is the inspiration behind the action? So tarot, Rider-Waite Tarot, that is what it looks at. What is your motivation behind your actions? Why do you really want this? Why does it sort of, concern you when you don't have that, or concern you that you do have that? That sort of thing. Because, through the generations we have been taught that you are not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not tall enough, you're too short, you're too white, you're too black, you're from the wrong social background, um, ladies, well, not as much as men, but ladies are often concerned with sort of like sort of like their bust. And as they maybe get older, they get concerned about the fact that maybe everything is not as firm as they were before. Men are incredibly obsessed with the with the anatomy of their genitalia. How big it is and long it is, and stuff like that. And we forget in all of this that you are not your body. In the same way that tarot cards are not tarot, you are not your body. Your body is a representation of who you are. It is it's almost like remember back in the ancient days, in sort of like ancient England, London, those places, you get like an invitation card that is sent to someone, to come, would you do us the honor to come and have tea with us, that sort of thing. The invitation itself wasn't the tea. It is just the invitation to the tea. And so in the same way, your body is not the tea. It's the invitation to life. It is the invitation to have this experience of life. But in essence, this life is not even life, even though it is life, because our perception makes it real, which means it must be real. So it becomes something. And so in the same way, remember with the tree of life, the nothingness becomes something by the observation of it. And as we observe things, we change it because we put ourselves in it, and so when we look at tarot, it really is where are you within the story? Because as humans, we believe ourselves to be so different from everybody else, but humans are very much the same. And I think that is the one thing that I discovered. Actually, this is a realization that I got back when I was in Abu Dhabi, is that as different as humans are, is as much as we are the same. We are more similar than we are different. And a lot of times we take our differences because of, how we look on the outside and what our preferences are and our traditions and our practices and our religions and our sort of like our yeses and our nos and those sort of things. But those are just really choices that we make, and that is really tarot. And literally that is not even the scheme of the top of tarot. So for me, I'm very passionate about teaching tarot because it's about really doing what I can to instill upon others what it really is. You know, I personally, I don't like to do more than one tarot reading a day because it's a really energetic practice, you know. And I mean, we got into the space where people go like, oh, let's do a reading for you, you know, and they pop in the cards and they get some kind of card. I'm just going to very random, it's like, oh, 10 of Pentacles, you know, yeah, great, fantastic. Everything is working out, money's working out, great for you, yippee. And that may be true, but you want to know why. Why is this happening? Why is love coming? Why is love leaving? Why is your career working out? Why is it not working out? Why is your health working? Why is it not working? What are the subconscious beliefs about you and life and abundance? And what does abundance mean to you? And what does it not mean to you? And what is your light potential and your dark potential? And because when you get them, you can choose. It's all about you. It's never about anybody else, ever. And I always say that to for me to even look at somebody else's energy without their permission, be through tarot, be through Reiki, be through whatever, channeling whatever, to me it's like a peeping Tom looking at somebody through the bathroom, you know, while they're doing their private stuff. You just don't do those things, you know. It's not moral, it's not ethical. And I mean, even saying that, it's you know, if you live in a different world where people are not, where people would understand that they're not their body, they wouldn't be bothered about whether you watch them through the bathroom or not. But you know, obviously we're not living in those, you know, that sort of space in time. Maybe we're moving towards that. And it's interesting, you know, we think of ourselves in this age that we are living as this very highly enlightened beings, yet we find our wisdom from ancient times, things that were thought thousands of years ago. And so when you look at that, you know, you really want to ask yourself the question, are we really as a human race, as a representation of life, as an expression of life, as an expression of universal possibility, are we really living in the wisest of times? Or are we sort of like repeating another cycle, and maybe we very much, you know, sort of like maybe in the beginning or intermediate phases of it, because, or maybe we're at the end of it, because we don't know everything. We don't know the whole mandala of life. We don't always know exactly where we are, which then again brings you back to the fact that your power is in the present moment, in the here and the now. So that in a nutshell is really tarot. But then you get Osho Zen tarot, and that is really about you, like, because Zen is, especially pertaining to Osho Zen tarot, Zen is about finding that inner peace within yourself, where you are happy with yourself, where you are happy with your life, where you are satisfied with your life, where you are fulfilled by your life, where you don't judge yourself by other people's perceptions of who you should be. That is it. But then it also, you know, something that a lot of spiritualists use as a get out of jail free card is they would say that my opinion of myself is the most important opinion, and you know, your opinion of me is not as strong as my opinion of myself, which I fully agree with. Sorry, it's so seasons are changing, and my lips are very dry, so I just wiped them very quickly. For those of you that noticed, there was like a in the recording, because one moment I was there, and then the next moment I was there. But technically speaking, I was always here, because if you are looking at this for the first time now, then this is the first time you are seeing this, even though I created this on September the 28th, 2022. So depending on when you see it, it's the first time that you see it, or maybe you've seen it before, so you're seeing it again, so it's not your first time, but it's the same thing, experienced in different ways. And that really is all with sort of like time being very sort of like linear in a way, you know, or not that linear, depending on how you look at it. And so Osho Zen Tarot is really, it really comes from that avenue that you can't really in life be happy if you're not really fulfilled. And you can't really be fulfilled if you're not at peace with yourself. And in order to be at peace with yourself, You need to be one with yourself. In order to be one with yourself, you need to really know yourself, you know. Um, so it's quite vast, and um, a lot of times, as I was saying, yes, you say that my opinion of myself is the most important opinion, and you've got the right as a collective being that is having individual experience. It is your right to have that. But what we sometimes also forget is that, you know, when you say that the opinion of others don't matter, for example, you are actually directly um, separating yourself from others, because it comes almost from buying into the idea that you're not part of everything, or you're not part of everyone, that you are separate. So yes, your opinion of yourself is the most important opinion, but you also want to understand that you are not just this. That when I speak about being Adrian, I'm not just this. You know, a lot of times, for example, people will say things like, "You are not a body with a soul," or they would say like, "You're not a body. You're sort of more an aura that has a body as opposed to a body that has an aura." But technically speaking, you're just part of the allness, you know. Or people will say that you are a soul that has a body and not a body that has a soul. But the soul is the allness, you know. So even when we say that I am a soul, if you come from the understanding that I am a soul and you are a soul, and we're having a soulful experience of oneness together, there is actually separation, because it means there's me and there's you and then there's that, and then there's that and 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 that, until we sort of bring it all back together again, and we make it one, and then we make it nothing, and you don't have to think about it until you start thinking about it again, you know. So Osho Zen Tarot in many ways, hey baby, Osho Zen Tarot in many ways focuses on really how to get a deeper connection with yourself. Now my experience is that people will either start with Rider-Waite Tarot and then, sometime later get into Osho Zen, or vice versa. And one really complements the other. It's because they both sort of quite structured, really. But I think Rider-Waite Tarot takes a slightly more, now you can't really fully call this, but just for interest's sake, Rider-Waite Tarot takes a more 3D approach, you know. Whereas Zen Tarot, Osho Zen Tarot takes a more 5D approach. But a lot of times we feel that 3D is not so good, 5D is better, superior, all of that. But everything just is. It's just that sometimes we've got a conscious awareness of it and sometimes we don't. But just because you don't have a conscious awareness of something, or interaction with something, or just because you don't even aware of the fact that it's there, doesn't mean that it's not there. So technically speaking, it's not there for you, but technically speaking, it is also there for you. Because you're part of everything and everything is part of you. Bruno loves this jacket. I don't know what it is. You want to lay on it? Okay. Yeah. Just one second. I actually want to wrap this up because it's getting a bit longer than I initially wanted it to be. But so the one really complements the other. They do work together. And I would say that if I have to maybe call it like that, I would say that you probably want to start with Rider-Waite Tarot, because it does give you certain concepts that Osho Zen Tarot then builds upon. And I think if you don't come from a very strong sort of, I want to say spiritual, more Eastern sort of background, if you don't, then Osho Zen Tarot can knock you for a complete six. Like, you're going to be like, what the actual fuck? But then again, you can have the same experience with Rider-Waite Tarot. It's different ways towards the same light. And so even, for example, a lot of times people will say, well, which is superior, tarot or oracles? And it's sort of like different strokes for different folks, because it is what is helping you connect with the allness of who you are. Take, for example, somebody like Colette Baron-Reid, who is amazing. She is beyond amazing. She's incredible. And when you see the incredible in someone else, it also means that it has to be in us, because it's physically not possible to perceive what is not in you. And even though saying in that, there's a lot of things within us that we're just not aware of, which means the other things that we're not aware of is still true for us, even though at that point we're not aware of it. So it's technically not true for us, but it still is true for us. I'm not going to go into that because it's just it's a completely different direction. Um, but for example, Colette would say that I like tarot because it's more fluid, whereas tarot is very structured. And I, for example, like tarot because it's more structured. So the one is not really superior to the other. It is more about what helps you connect into that flow. And I think the more you kind of follow what my beautiful friend Lisa King, who's a human design practitioner, which is sort of like a combination of like astrology and like numerology and a couple of other things, really brilliant. Um, um, so what that really is that it's just everything. Like it's one of those things that you sort of get it when you get it. And if you've probably been looking up at this up until now, because the time just went like 50 minutes and 55 seconds, 555, then if you hear, then you probably get it. Um, but then you think something like thought tarot, for example, um, that that in a way, I think if you really want to speak about the next level of tarot, I would say the thought tarot definitely is that. I would not recommend that you even think of going in the thought direction if you don't have a fundamental understanding of Rider-Waite tarot, so to speak. But then again, that in itself is not really true, because some people start with thought and they really get into it. And you would imagine that when they then come back to Rider-Waite tarot, they would say, well, this is a watered down version, but not really, because then you're like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing, this is so incredible. So the one is not really superior to the other. It's like a chain. Every link is required in order for it to actually be a chain. There's no such thing as the weakest link, you know. And the more things you study, the more you get into it. Now, when you speak about thought tarot, and I think I'm just going to finish off with that, but when you look into something like thought tarot, a lot of people go like, oh my goodness, Aleister Crowley, and you are more than welcome to have whatever opinion you want to have of Aleister Crowley, because I think it's so easy to throw mud at other people. They did that, they did that, they did that. But, I mean, sweep in front of your own fucking door. I mean, the Bible says that. Don't be concerned about the splint in somebody else's eye. Be concerned about that big chunk of wood in your eye, that sort of thing, because your life, again, is about you. Um, and I think things that come into this world that is very powerful, it often does come from controversy. Because Osho, for example, with Osho Zen tarot, I mean, there were people that thought that Osho was really like, he was the dude. And there were some people that was like, oh, that's the worst person that has ever been born. And both truths are true for the observer, and then sometimes that observer changed their mind, and then the alter truth becomes true for them. You look at something like Rider-Waite tarot, for example. So Arthur Edward Waite, who is the conceptualizer of Rider-Waite tarot. Pamela Coleman Smith, interesting person. She was an Aquarius. She was amazing. But then again, amazing by what I know. You know. Um, and as well as Aleister Crowley, Lady Frida Harris, who was sort of like the Pamela Coleman Smith for Thought Tarot, because Pamela Coleman Smith was an artist who created the artwork for Rider-Waite Tarot, and then you know Lady Frida Harris was the artist, the illustrator for sorry um, for Thought Tarot. And then even a lady who was initially an American, who then changed her name to Madiba Padma, was the person who did the artwork for Osho. And they also came from a very sort of different side. But when you look at Rider-Waite Tarot and Thought Tarot, these people were all born of sort of like the golden age, sort of like occult practices. And whilst a lot of people make Aleister Crowley so bad for, you know, the things that he's done. It's always funny to me that nobody's speaking about the fact that Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith were never supposed to create the Rider-Waite Tarot, in the sense that the information that was being shared or relayed, it wasn't supposed to be shared with others. You know, there were some vows that were taken that we're keeping this information to ourselves. We're not sharing it with other people. So they were kind of like a bad boy and a bad girl as well. Um, and I would say, you know, in life, when you look at something like tarot, for example, you maybe want to look at what does it offer me? What is it making possible for me? Because it's got beautiful, beautiful gifts for you, but as long as you understand that it really is about you, and it is about your life, and it isn't about other people. And my focus in everything that I do is to help other people to discover their magic and to unlock their magic and to expand it and to maintain it and to benefit from it and to find ways to balance their own energy. And to balance your own energy, you need to know your light side and your dark side. You know, as I always say, we've got Hitler potential and Mother Teresa potential, but both of those, as you spoke in the beginning of this video, both of those are extremities. And do you really want to roll with those extremities? Because they are a lot, you know. um, Use somebody, for example, somebody like beautiful Princess Diana, for example. Everybody loved her. She was this ray of light, but it was overwhelming to her in many ways to be that ray of light. And you know, so it's the same thing with life. What do you actually really, really want? And that is what tarot is giving you and supposed to give you. And I would say that if you practice the tarot, that's really what it's about. That and like many other things as well. But if you go for a tarot reading, you tarot readings are supposed to empower you. You know, even if the news is not good, it has to give you options. Like, you know, if you go to a doctor and the doctor says that you're not that well, you're sick and this and this and that, they have to give you some sort of idea. These are your options. Do you want to go the holistic approach? You want to go this way, that way? Medicine, these are your options. This is probably how long you have. This is, you want to get your affairs in order. You want to make yourself comfortable. Maybe you need drier air. Maybe you need more moist air. That sort of thing. And so that is what tarot really gives you. Um, and it's a beautiful experience because you never know everything. You're always learning. I don't know everything about Rider-Waite Tarot. I don't know everything about Osho Zen Tarot. I don't know everything about Thoth Tarot. I don't know everything about energy. And the more you learn and you get invested in things, you also change them. So your mere interaction creates more. And that is the magic of life. And that is what I'd like to share with you. And you know, if you've got any sort of questions or maybe something different that you'd like me to make a video about, then do let me know and I'd be very happy to do that. But from my heart, I wish you blessings, love, and light. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Namaste. I'll see you next time.